But I think one of the mistakes people make is they lack a significant amount of structure in how they hire. Redundancy and having multiple points of view doesn't mean hiring by consensus, because I actually think hiring by consensus leads you to worse decisions. I don't think we're a smaller team because of AI yet. I think we get more done because of AI. Yeah, as resources get cheaper, you're not gonna use less of them, which is the typical supply-demand curve. You'll actually use more of them. Fundamentally, people are really bad at hiring, and interviewing is sort of useless in a lot of ways.
Welcome to How I Hire, the podcast where we talk with senior go-to-market leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow new talent. Today, I'm joined by Kyle Norton. Kyle is a CRO at Owner.com, which provides a turnkey digital platform for restaurants. Before that, Kyle was a sales leader at Shopify. So if there's somebody who knows selling to Main Street businesses, it's Kyle. Kyle, it's great to have you.
Appreciate it. Good to see you again, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to this. So you target a different buyer than most B2B sales teams. I'm excited to talk to you about the strategies used to build your team. I've heard you on a lot of other podcasts talk is hiring is a part of the overall podcast discussion, but I'm excited to go deep on how you hire today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because I think a lot about this. So it's a topic that is near and dear to my heart.
That's great. We're going to take it in some fun directions for sure. How do you think about team design and where you need to hire people? I guess I would break it into two buckets. There's the senior exec roles where you're being very strategic, and then there's the always on type of roles. I guess we'll go down both, but I'd be curious, if you're designing a new exec role, how do you think about that? How do you design it? When do you know you need to hire a new senior go-to-market exec?
The when question is the trickiest one, because I think we're all balancing the same thing of not becoming a overly top-heavy organization with a bunch of senior execs cooking up plans in ivory towers without the muscle to go execute. There's obviously a lot of inefficiency there, but we are in a very rapidly scaling business. We're approaching 50 million ARR, still growing close to 2.5x year over year. So in that world, we tend to be hiring ahead quite a bit. So we're hiring a director of Salesforce architecture right now. Somebody that's going to be quite senior coming from a much larger company. And that's a person that most companies might not hire for a few quarters or a few years. But, with the speed at which we are moving as an organization and all of the infrastructure investments, it's a hire that makes sense for us to pull forward because the decisions you make now can have really significant ramifications in terms of tech debt, which better than most, in some future period. And so the when is the hardest part. I think a lot of it is feel. Generally, what types of folks you'll have in the organization. But the question is when do I need a senior sales leader versus a functional sales leader? When do I need my first RevOps leader or a chief of staff? When do I invest in some of these other functions? So you'll have some pattern recognition. I find talking to other CROs is eminently helpful here. A couple hours ago, I was on a call with a bunch of the Pavilion Gold people, and this was a topic of conversation, and some folks shared really interesting insight on it, when they placed these roles and how they knew. And there's not an awesome framework or roadmap to follow. So I think having peers to benchmark against is a piece of it, and it is feel. I still think at the end of the day, where are you feeling pressure from the organization? Where are you feeling like you're not moving fast enough, that you want to make more progress? What's bottlenecked by you personally? We hired an SVP of go-to-market strategy recently, who's a very senior executive, was HubSpot for 8 years, worked directly with Brian Halligan, reported into him. And that was to unlock a series of investments that we're making because I was basically bottlenecking it. I couldn't spend as much time as I think these bets needed. And that was a field thing. And we got lucky that, he was in our orbit as a company, and he's an incredible leader. And so we went ahead and made that decision. And so figuring out that piece of it is, I think, very difficult, nuanced. Pattern recognition helps, and it's a field thing. Hiring reps is not at all vibes and feel. That is programmatic, and you need to be awesome in the spreadsheet to be able to do that well, so that you are capturing growth while managing your unit economics and efficiency. And if we want to triple click into that, we can. But
I'm excited too. I got two questions kind of on the strategy of the senior folks first. One is, I think your point was really solid on you're hiring ahead when you're growing fast. People are like, hey, what level should I hire at? And I always say, listen, if you're growing at the types of rates you're growing at, overhire the person that can kind of pull you up, and you don't have to worry about leveling them at the future point. They can they've seen the things ahead. So I love how you gave the example of the SVP of strategy.
And I do the same thing. My heuristic is like, if you are above 20 million ARR and still doubling, you have a pretty good chance you're hitting some exit velocity. You should be putting somebody into the seat today that can do the job that today can do the job required in 18 months.
Yes.
And so you're going to have like an 18-month hire ahead, and you're hopefully going to put somebody in that role that also has a lot of potential. And so by the time you get to that point in 18 months, they've also leveled themselves up so that they're ready to take the next year and hopefully the year after that. Because the same as everybody, I have to requalify for my job every single quarter. I was the CRO at a 20 million ARR business like a year and a bit ago, and now I'm the CRO at a $50 million business. And so, like, am I still qualified to do that? Am I growing rapidly enough to be credible in this seat? And everybody has to ask themselves that question. You have to ask yourself that question about your team as well. We have that obligation to scaling ourselves, and so you're trying to do that math with senior hires.
How often are you responding to great candidates that just appear in front of you for the senior level roles versus saying, I need to go find that one? So take the HubSpot person, for example. Was that an opportunistic hire, or were you conscious that you needed the hire before you went and did it?
A little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
He was sort of around the business doing a little bit of advisory work with us and just acting as a resource as we tried to figure some of this stuff out. And as soon as I felt like I need somebody full-time in this role driving these initiatives, it was like a no-brainer. He's the guy. So that was a little bit of a blend. This architecture role was, we know we need somebody. My VP of RevOps is a very humble and thoughtful person. And so he realized, he's like, hey, I think I'm at the outer reaches of my technical architecture competence. Let's go hire an expert. We've made a few purely opportunistic hires where there's just an incredible person. You just have to find them a seat. I haven't done that as much in the revenue org though. That's been in other places more than the revenue team. But sometimes you do just meet a candidate and you're like, I don't care where, but we need to find a seat. We'll do that a little bit, but the bar is extremely high for that.
Yes. It's hard at that senior level because they can also cause chaos as well too.
Yeah. If you don't have the production capacity, putting a senior person in that's going to build a strategy and a plan and have great ideas doesn't really get you anywhere if you're still bottlenecked by RevOps and BizOps and data and enablement. So you have to be thoughtful there. Oftentimes we're pulling roles forward more than we are purely creating opportunistic things for people to do, where we know we need something in the future and it's maybe in a headcount plan, or maybe it's just in the leader's head, knowing that, hey, in some point I need a marketing ops individual, and the person floats into your life. You're like, well, we probably would have waited 6 months, but this person's amazing and was a recommendation. Let's find a way to make that work. That happens more frequently.
It also, to the point we touched on of the growth, right? If you're growing at 15% a year, there's no budget for any headcount and you can't pull it forward. If you're growing 100% a year, we got this great guy or gal, like let's pull them forward a little bit. It's a lot easier conversation with your CFO as well.
And you can fund, the other thing is at these growth rates, you can fund it out of growth. You can say, okay, this person is expensive, but they are going to make this initiative go faster and it will drive this ARR expansion. And so your ROI is really positive. You have a lot more flexibility in a high growth environment. We've raised our forecast to the board, I think 3 times already this year, and we're like 7 months in. So, you have more credibility to say, okay, well, we're going to do this and we're going to pull this forward. We're going to spend the money. We're going to, I've just moved some headcount around very recently to back one of our big 2026 facing bets that's going well. And it's a no-brainer. It's we'll find the funding for it. And if you just do a little napkin math to model it out, there's actually the revenue there to justify the spend without increasing burn. So there's a few ways to get at it though, to get the path there.
Last question before we dive into the process stuff, which I'm really excited about, is you touched a little bit early on kind of like being really deliberate on senior level hires. Do you believe with AI changes in businesses that leadership teams of these go-to-market leaders are just smaller and more nimble now? Or is that a function of the owner.com go-to-market model?
I don't think we're a smaller team because of AI yet.
Yeah.
I think we get more done because of AI for sure, and at a higher quality. This again comes back to what's that principle in energy where the more available something is?
Gasoline one where you have more energy. Yeah, it's like you can.
Yeah.
I forget the name, but it's like the Divinus principle or something like that, or the.
I think there's more capacity to do things, so we're just doing more things, and AI is giving us a lot of leverage, but the teams are still fairly big. Like our span of control hasn't changed a ton, but it will over time. I think over time, you will have teams that are managing portions of a team that are basically agents. I think conceptualizing that is a little hard right now, but if you could have a bunch of work done by workflows and tools that otherwise would be done by people, then you are in essence managing these people agent hybrid teams. Yeah. I think sometimes it's just a fun future to tease, even though it's just automation. It's just technology leverage. But I think we're going to still maintain fairly significant teams because a bunch of the advantage is going to get competed away anyways. If your competitors are all getting similar advantages from AI, then you're still going to have to hire as many developers and as many sales reps. It's just everything gets more efficient, but that arbitrage gets competed away.
I love that. That makes a ton of sense. Okay, let's dive into maybe some of the machines you've built. I've done it to a couple high velocity, low ACV companies, so I'm really excited to hear how you think about hiring in a systematic way.
Jevons paradox, by the way, that was going to drive me nuts. Yeah.
If anyone hasn't heard that term, it's a great one. It's it's more resources equals you're actually going to use more of them rather than less.
Yeah, as resources get cheaper, you're not going to use less of them, which is a typical supply demand curve. You'll actually use more of them because more demand comes in based on the lower price. So hiring systems. I think this is fundamentally, and this is not just a SMB high velocity sales sales principles. I've managed enterprise teams. I've hired enterprise teams, and I tried to take the same level of rigor in those roles as well. But I think one of the mistakes people make is they lack significant amount of structure in how they hire. Because fundamentally, people are really bad at hiring, and interviewing is sort of useless in a lot of ways. Yep. If you really go back to the research on the predictive qualities of the interview process, especially behavioral interviews, versus in-seat performance. If you read Daniel Kahneman's work, if you read Thinking Fast and Slow, we are incredibly biased decision makers. We rely on patterns and heuristics as humans to help us navigate the world, and therefore in general, people are just terrible at hiring. Like, without all of this, I would probably be terrible at it as well. And some people will delude themselves to thinking it's like, I have a good eye for talent. I know where to dig and yada, yada. I don't think it's true. I think, there's a lot of false attribution bias there. And if you stepped back and you looked at your hiring track record, most leaders would go, oh man, like I was wrong 30% of the time, or more. And so is that better than, fairly blindly just like picking resumes out of a stack that meet a certain threshold? Anybody that says President's Club on their resume, we hire. Would that be a better strategy than going through a whole like meandering interview process? Yes, potentially. And so I think the structure here is to fight against human bias. The structure here is to resist the urge to rely on bad heuristics. And the best example here, especially in hiring salespeople, is the halo effect. So this goes back.
It's a great book. Yeah.
Yeah. And this goes back to some of Kahneman's early research. What happens is there's one strength in a candidate that can make you think much more highly about the other skills that you think are important. Mm-hmm. And in salespeople, that's charisma. People who are really charismatic and build incredible rapport, we tend to, without a very structured scorecarding process, think they're awesome at all sorts of different things. But if you were really paying attention, and this is a Kahneman thing, being structured in your scorecard and deliberate, that you're asking specific questions to get at specific hiring criteria and measuring them independently of every other criteria. Because one of the things that is really important in many sales environments is how organized and conscientious are you? And oftentimes we don't even think to actually ask ourselves that question and really reflect on what are the signals in this interview process that indicate whether or not this person is organized or not. And we just go off of this impression, man, they were really personable and very charismatic, and we're just like, they're a hire. But what Kahneman talks about is when you break out the different components of that hiring criteria, you're forced to make more independent decisions. And so in our hiring scorecard, we have like different things broken out, even down to our company values. So there's like 5 company values that we're scoring against independently, so that you're not commingling. And I think this is one piece of hiring excellence is, are you really carefully scorecarding? And we can talk about going back to your scorecards to ask yourselves the question if those are the right criteria. But do you have a really great scorecard? Do you have a consistent process so that there is a controlled environment to evaluate these things? And so we ask the same questions in the same order across the same sets of interviews. So in my interviews, I ask the same few things in the same order every single time. We run the case study with the same inputs, with the same questions every single time. We often give the candidate similar or the same feedback in those interviews, just so that we're constraining variables. Like when I interviewed for VPs of sales, I gave them the same feedback every single time, regardless of how they had sort of performed in the case study, so that I could understand how they responded to that exact piece of feedback and compare that across the different candidates. And so it's really about like structure and consistency. Do you have a standard interview process? Do you have a scorecard? Is your applicant tracking system set up in a way to support the structured acquisition of that information? And then, do you have enough redundancy in your hiring system so that you're getting multiple points of view on a candidate. And so
I was going to ask you, are you using something like a meta view, which is like the Gong for interviews, or do you value the voice and reflecting back on those interviews at all?
we use MetaView, and I've never gone back to my MetaView notes a single time.
Okay.
So-
I've always wondered, I think it would be very brilliant if in the roundups, or we'll dive deeper into how you review candidates post hire and see how good they are. But if you were using that data, so it sounds like you're capturing the data, but are you leveraging it is a different question.
We're capturing it, and we're working on a project to take all of those transcripts, all of the interview data, put it into a model to make the data more structured so that we could do sort of a regression analysis to understand what parts of the candidate responses are actually most predictive of in-role success. We've done a very rudimentary version of this, which we can talk about. But I think going back to your original question, like how do you get structured? And the last thing I was talking about was redundancy. And so redundancy and having multiple points of view doesn't mean hiring by consensus, because I actually think hiring by consensus leads you to worse decisions. So we are a champion-based hiring approach, not a consensus-based hiring approach. So I'm going to give feedback to the hiring manager. I interview you and I'm like, oh, Andy's great, but he doesn't seem like a very curious person. He didn't have many questions for me. And so one of our company principles is scale yourself. So I'm not sure if they have the scale yourself quality. And I'll bring that back to the hiring manager, but I only spend 30 or 45 minutes with these candidates. And maybe they go, oh, no, we started talking about this, and they talked about all of these ways they're using AI, and they watched all these YouTube videos, and they knew all this stuff, and they read this book on whatever. Okay, great. Like you are the hiring manager. You have spent most of the time 3 to 4x the number of hours that I've spent with them. Ultimately, it's your decision. You have to champion.
Yeah.
Like you don't get to rely on like me giving the thumbs up. It's not my decision. It's your decision, but I'm going to give you feedback, and I'm going to press on the places where I think there may be weakness. Sometimes I'm just like, this person is a stud. Like, let's go get them. But oftentimes I'm prodding, and they have to reflect on that and then make the decision. Because
have you ever overruled, Kyle? I mean, I personally take the approach you do, which is like my hiring manager needs to own that decision. And they will learn. And if I overrule, they don't. But I'm curious, like, are there patterns where you see and you say, this one's not going to work?
I'm sure I have like said, hey, this is a no-go for me for whatever reason, because I'm breaking my rule. My rule is to like give them the feedback. I'm going to be strong about the feedback. Like, I don't think this is a good hire. And I've probably gone so far as to make it feel like a straight veto, but I really try not to.
So how do people, if there's more on the structure, this is powerful. I feel like one thing we talked about beforehand was how do you kind of reflect back on candidates after you've hired them? I'd love to hear kind of your approach. Yeah. Very few companies do that. And so it's neat to see a company that's really built that into their processes.
Yeah. So one of the funny things is, in sales, you really understand the power of analysis and feedback and iteration. And in hiring, we don't seem to sort of do that ever. We just hire a bunch of people and then we keep doing that forever, more or less. Most companies don't iterate and improve their hiring process all that frequently, or have a mechanism to give really good feedback to the manager, because many of these decisions are on a long time horizon. So what we've done right now, it's on a quarterly cadence now, but it is still more qualitative than it is quantitative. We're going to move to a more data-backed approach when we can do the synthesis of the transcripts and a bunch of other stuff. But right now, what we do is our GTM TA leader, she works with RevOps to pull all of the people that we've hired. We take the scores at each stage. So recruiter screen, hiring manager 1, case study, bar raiser, which is me, and puts it on a spreadsheet. And then we measure it against their their total attainment, so their lifetime attainment, and then their first 3-month attainment, to understand if there's a difference. Because I'm actually more interested in how somebody is after 4 to 6 months than how they are in month 2.
Yep.
And this is a really valuable process for a bunch of reasons. One is you start to understand where your process is good and not so good, because you'll look at a candidate who you all thought was great. You all thought was great. You all gave 4s and they weren't that good in the role. And so then what we do is, and it's mostly about evaluating the outliers in this process. So we'll sit down for like 90 minutes and go person by person, and where there is a high score with low productivity, or lower scores and high productivity, we go into every one of those candidates in Lever, and we'll read all of the interview notes together. One feedback is often, your notes suck, take better notes, which is a good feedback mechanism. But then we'll go through and say, oh, well, in the role, they're not very coachable. And so what did we ask enough questions? Did we dig deep enough into their coachability? And it's like, oh no, we skimmed over it. Or they gave this answer and I could have gone to like another 2 levels deeper to get to the heart of it. So you get feedback on your overall process, what's working and what's not, in specific manager feedback on like, what did those managers miss? Especially when we use a 4-point system. So if somebody's a 4 or a 3 or a 4, strong hire versus hire. So the manager who got it wrong, you can go in and say, and like ask yourselves those questions. And one of the things that we realized on a macro basis, well, it was an individual observation that then we rolled up to be macro. We noticed one person was consistently rating people as 3s who went on to be actually really good in the role. And they were really focused on the sales craft. Like you could read the notes in there. Those people were really great in the case study. They delivered it well, good discovery, like the sales acumen was really there. Whereas other people were more focused on the intangibles. So their history of excellence, their coachability, curiosity, all of those other things. And what we found is surprisingly, the sales craft that they exhibited in the case study was actually not that indicative of their success in the role. Mm-hmm. It was all of those other things that were way more important. And so we've subsequently streamlined what the case study looks at. We're making it slightly simpler because it just wasn't predictive of success, which is crazy as a sales leader. Like everybody listening to this, we all have mock demos or like that case study stage. And there's a potential, this might be unique to our environment because we're so coaching heavy and it's high velocity. So we can really mold DNA into sales excellence better than most. But I sent this to a few friends of mine because they're going to run the same process. And I'm really curious to hear what they see in terms of like how predictive is the case study.
Am I correct? You guys invest heavily in the enablement function as well too. You talked about how you're heavy on coaching. Have you?
Big enablement investment. Yeah.
I remember at one company I was at, all these rockstar AEs were excited to become managers. I was like, if you don't have great enablement, don't do it. Right. And so I'm guessing you spend a lot of time there. If you're doing a lot of growing and developing yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Really strong enablement leader, strong team, and a big team for the size of organization, but it's paid off. And we've just started hiring new grads. So kids straight out of the top schools and business schools in Ontario, and they're flying out of the gates.
Yeah,
like they're arguably ramping faster than the SDRs we hired that had sales experience previously because they're very high potential.
Yeah, they're moldable. They're not cynical of like, oh man, I've done it this way 3 times. I really don't need to put it in the system or things like that.
Yeah, and so we continue to rotate our hiring approach more and more to, are you a psychotic worker? Like, do you just like to work hard? You like to grind? You like to get good at things? Are you really organized? because it's hard to do high velocity if you're disorganized. It just you miss everything and your deals go cold. And then do they have a learner's mindset? Do they really want to study and learn? Are they curious? Are they coachable? If they have those things, generally we can teach them the rest. And there's a bunch of examples of people on the team where the case studies were straight up not good, especially with some of our like new grad hires or our most junior hires. Sometimes the case studies are like, we're like, they really struggled and they like didn't quite get this, but then we just love their makeup. We just love the fact that they did awesome in school and they were an athlete and they did, extracurricular stuff and their parents run a restaurant or like whatever, like, we'll figure it out if they can figure it out. And, some of those people that with very like questionable case study performances are crushing now.
You mean sell me that pen is not the best question to ask in a sales interview?
Apparently not.
No.
Apparently not.
How do, so flipping around from the candidate perspective, how do they break through the noise?
Multi-threading for sure helps. Trying to reach out to multiple people in the organization through multiple channels. Mm-hmm. I've said this on podcasts before, but if you really want to get an interview, all you got to do is cold call that functional leader. I no longer say cold call me because I don't want the cold calls, but cold call Brandon, who runs BDR, or cold call Brian, who runs cold call the hiring manager. Nobody makes cold calls, and that's the business we're in. So do the work. So yeah, you can reach out on LinkedIn, you can send an email. Trying to get a referral in is really helpful. But then, do the uncomfortable thing and make the call.
By the way, I've got stats from Culture Amp on if you are a caller, it's the mindset. It may not be the actual calls because people may not pick up, but we had this dude in Australia that was like 4x anyone else. And when we dug into it, it was just, he thought about everything was, how do I put myself in an uncomfortable position and do what doesn't feel right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very similar to our environment. So multi-threading, multi-channel, and being really thoughtful about your outreach. Bad outreach is actually worse than no outreach, I think. Yeah. And so you want to have, a really clear opinion on why owner and why you, and mention your results. It's funny. I'll get some of these emails and people don't talk about their sales results at all. And so I assume that the results are crap, because if you were a President's Club performer who smoked quota every single quarter, you're going to mention that in the outreach. But there's been rare occasions where people do have results and fail to mention them. But I would definitely be results oriented in that outreach.
I like that. We talked the other day about references. You and I were talking. I'd be fascinated to hear how you think about references in sales interviewing. Yeah.
So references are arguably more valuable than almost anything else you're going to do in the interview process. And I would say references escalate in importance as you raise in seniority, the role you're hiring for.
Yep.
References for an SDR, you want to see great references, but most of the time they're going to be with like a summer internship manager, or you're not normally going to get a ton of feedback there. But especially managers, directors, VPs, you need to go hardcore with references. Our CEO is the king of this. Mm-hmm. And he'll go to town on references. And so there's a couple like strategic ways to do it. So when I get to close to offer, so when we've gone through all the stages with the candidate, let's just talk senior hiring to start. I will send them my mutual references email. It's a template. And so, hey, thanks for going through the process with me. We're really excited about it. Now is the time where we typically do references, and we want this to be like a mutual process. So I'm going to introduce you to these people on the team who you would be spending time working with, and get to know them, but also ask them about what it's like working for me and working at the company. And I'm trying to encourage them to really dig in. And then I say, and here's a list of every single person that has worked directly for me since I became a VP of sales and all of my key counterparts. So I have this list with everybody's LinkedIn on it of all of like the people who reported directly into me, and then my marketing counterparts, my CS counterparts. I say like, I won't, because if I give you referrals, they're all going to be people that are going to say good things, but this is everybody. If you want to source your own referrals, if there's anybody that's not in this list that you want to go talk to, please go do it. You have my full permission to really deeply background on me. And I would like the same permission for you. Like, it'd be great if you can give me the names of 2 people you've reported into and 2 people that have reported directly into you. But I'd love it if you could give me the green light to go source my own references. Just let me know who I should not go speak with. Because maybe it's like, this is the best friend of my current boss, or there might be like some other sensitivity that I want to be mindful of. I don't want to be disruptive. And sometimes the response back is like, well, like, I don't really want you to talk to my like old VP of sales because they sucked and we didn't get along and this is why I left. So you'll learn stuff just from that process that maybe you want to dig into the candidate with, but then you get the green light and then it's your job to go digging. And so I'll tag my TA team in on this, and I'll say, hey, like, can you go look on LinkedIn for these people who were at this company at this time that would have overlapped? And then I'll just send out some outreach. Hey, I'm about to hire Andy. This is a great tip from my CEO. He's like, this is a really important role and we really need to get it right. And so your feedback would be invaluable to me for that process, because it lets them know that it's important. It is really, really, really important. And so making sure that this person knows that it's an important input. One, it'll improve your response rates and people picking up on this, and then it'll help them open up more honestly. And then I always say to them, he's like, I won't share anything with the candidate. Everything is between you and me. They won't even know that we spoke if you would prefer that. And then I'll get into my sort of back channel questions. I try to be like brief to be respectful of time. And the biggest things that I want to know is like, where would you rank this person in all of the people you've worked with in this function? So if I'm hiring a VP of sales, I'll ask the CS leader or the founder that person worked with. I was like, of all of the VPs, of all the sales leaders you've ever worked with, where does this person stack rank amongst them? In terms of like percentile. And if people are saying, oh, like, definitely 30th percentile, no bueno for me. Because I want people who are like, I want to hear this is the best person I've ever worked with, or the best like leader in marketing I've ever worked with, or top 5%, top 10%. That's really what we're trying to find. And I want to understand that person's working style. Like if this person works for me, how do I best engage with them? What do I need to know about being their manager? This is sort of a nuanced way of getting towards some of their work quirks as well.
Yeah.
What are the things that don't work for Andy? And it's like, oh, well, like, Andy doesn't want feedback. Andy, like, he just wants to be left alone. Like, sort of doesn't work for me. Like, to be, like I want feedback from my direct reports. Like I can't have a direct report that doesn't want feedback and just wants to be like totally left alone. That's a yellow flag. And so I want to like be pretty diligent. I want to source a bunch of these. I really do want to encourage that person to talk to people that have worked for me in the past, because it's about fit at the end of the day. There's no perfect candidate, but there's candidates that better fit your culture, because, maybe my particular strengths and weaknesses don't match with this person. Maybe my working style doesn't really make sense for this individual. So like finding that match is important.
I've learned so much on your template. It was so powerful. One thing I'll share with you that I found really helpful: I write and maintain and keep updated my user manual, because I am who I am, and I want people to. I have my quirks and you have yours, and so every time I hire somebody, I'm like, listen, this is who I am. You don't have to write yours, but you can read mine, and we can have the conversation, because there are places where I'm going to come across insanely intense, but I don't mean to. But if you don't know that, it's going to scare you. So I think the writing your own user manual has been a powerful one for me. But if you're
I have a document called my blueprint. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
because there's little things and you don't understand. You live in your own head, so it's hard to appreciate some of the things that you do might be really different for folks. And so it's good to source that from your current teams. It's a good feedback mechanism. But just like little things, like I really like to understand things. And so I'm generally curious. So I might ask a bunch of questions about stuff. And if you don't know that it's coming from a place of curiosity and interest, you might think I'm second guessing you or I'm questioning you. But, in my blueprint, I talk about how I am curious to understand root cause. Or one of the other things is like, I'm opinionated, but open. It's like, look, like I'm going to have an opinion about most stuff because I spent a lot of time thinking about revenue leadership and systems building. But you should never let that scare you away from advocating for what you think is the right thing. Like, don't let me bully you off your opinion because it's opinionated, but open. Just bring me good logic and data and tell me I'm wrong. And I'm super open-minded. I'm
but there could be the other side if they don't know your blueprint and they'd be like, this guy just has his opinion, he doesn't want to be open. And it's like you're creating that space for people to do that, which I do the same thing.
Yeah. And some people are just like, they're not going to jive. They're not going to jive with your approach or your style. And they just want something different. And it's good to learn that up front.
I like that. One more thing you mentioned earlier on our prep chat was what types of references you want, direct reports and direct managers. I'd be curious how you look at, like, say somebody sends you that list of references. What are the good ones to send you? What are the bad ones? What are the ones you do want to talk to?
So you want to be diligent to triangulate. I definitely want to talk to as many people that person has worked directly for as I can. Mm-hmm. Minimum of 2. And I want to make sure that I'm talking to multiple people that have worked for that individual. This is where I've gone wrong in the past, where I've interviewed, that person's past 2 founders and maybe somebody else, and they're glowing references. I was like, person is a stud, let's go. But I didn't go interview enough of their direct reports or in one case, like any of the direct reports. And I know I would have learned a lot there. But the upwards feedback, the feedback from above was so strong that it was just confirming my priors. And so we went ahead, but instead you should be really diligent to try to talk to like 2, 3, 4 managers that have worked for that person to really get an understanding of what it's like to work for them. Because ultimately that is the thing that is more important than anything, is what is the engagement you can drive within your team. How do you develop them? How do you motivate? How do you focus them so that they can do the same for their teams? And if it's not there, it's an issue, because it's much easier to do the smoke and mirrors thing with your boss, especially if you report into a CEO or somebody who's not in the day-to-day weeds. But you can't really smoke and mirrors. You can't obfuscate with your direct managers, with your direct reports.
Yeah, there was people can be two-faced. Sometimes they can be amazing to the senior leadership and total pricks to the people below them. I've seen that happen. I hate those people. They set red flags, but there's sometimes you can miss them if you don't do the downward interviews. Well, I know we're getting towards time. Maybe we can wrap up with one fun one. I mean, owner.com has built an amazing brand. I hear about it everywhere. I'd love to hear kind of how you think about your employer brand and your personal brand when you're hiring folks.
Yeah. So for sales, it's arguably more about your personal brand as a leader. So I've been writing on LinkedIn for, 5 or 6 years now, with more regularity and intensity the last couple of years. That's the reason I started the podcast, was one, to learn from super smart people. But also it's a great brand building exercise. I really want to be known in the market as a thought leader and somebody that leaders and reps should really want to come work for. Mm-hmm. And so, but it is a long payoff, but it's compounding. And so, I got very little benefit from writing on LinkedIn for a while, but then all of a sudden it started to have a bit of a flywheel. And then every post got you more people and more people. And then when I posted roles, like there was, before the LinkedIn algorithm changed at the beginning of the year,
Yep.
I could post BDR and AE roles and get 40 to 80,000 impressions and like over 1,000 applicants in 24 to 48 hours. Quality of that applicant is obviously a spectrum, but we were able to build 80% of our initial IC team through my network, like 1 degree removed, basically. People who, like a lot of the original team was, they had worked with somebody who I had worked with, or we were 1 degree connected and they brought in their friends, and it was a lot of the network. But it's easy to be on people's radar and pull in those second degree folks when you have a megaphone. And I think leaders need to be really conscious of it, and be conscious of like what's happening on your rep view, what's happening on Glassdoor, keeping a pulse on your team. Like I think this is one of the underappreciated aspects of having a highly engaged team, is they're going to be excited to bring in their friends and share the message. And so there's just easy things to do to make sure that your organization is excited about being there. And oftentimes we think too transactionally about our teams. I just, like, as a leadership philosophy, agree with this. Like, the servant leadership approach is the thing that I stress the most with my leaders. But also there's this incredible flywheel that, like, we're in the top 0.03%, top 0.3% of companies on RepView, and our DoorDash is impeccable, and our Glassdoor is impeccable. And those things matter a lot in today's world.
I could not agree more. I coach a lot of people on getting on podcasts, writing. You don't just do it because you want followers. This builds your brand as a leader. I think when people see you on a podcast like this, they want thoughtful, intelligent leaders that they can get excited about. And so
and it can go wrong. Like, if you're not thoughtful and intelligent, going on podcasts might not actually help you. But so you want to cultivate that. And if you're going to do podcasts, be really prepared with something to say. But I think it's an important thing for leaders to do.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really learned a lot. I think references and your tactics there, I've got a bunch of notes. And then systematic hiring, I've not met anybody that does it better. So thank you again, Kyle.
Appreciate the time. Thanks, Andy.